Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. So every morning we get up. On the weekends we don't necessarily answer them and save it, but those are our quiet days. But otherwise, we save all of your questions. They're all on YouTube. If you want to ask questions, of course, you can go into Makana. You can ask the questions. You can chat about the questions. You can vote on the questions. If you're not in Makana, of course, you can use askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. Go up there and ask your question, and usually within a day or two, if it's well-formed and about tech, then there's a good chance we'll put it in there. So throw it in there, askofficehours.global. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
First one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael this morning, and Douglas wonders, the Yamaha DM3 little audio mixer can split itself into 3 USB devices, one 12-channel and 3 2-channel, instead of one 18-channel device. With Loopback and similar tools available, when would you split?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a specific reason that I would do that. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, one reason is you might want to record a stereo out, just a stereo pair to split one of those 2 channels out. So depending upon how you want to submix the stuff in the Yamaha DM3 itself, you can have groups or pairs coming out. Let's say you want to record a stereo mix, plus you want to record ISOs. So you want to take those outputs that are coming over the USB and take all the isolated channels out and take the stereo mix down out, the mix bus down out. And or you might have a sub mix that you want to store as a recording as well. So you could bring that out into your audio workstation. So and treat it as a separate audio feed. That's what I would do.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I'm still experimenting with vMix 27 and the Zoom integration. I can start and join meetings, seeing the names of participants, but I cannot see my participants' video or hear audio. I also can't send anything back to Zoom. Thoughts?
Well, I guess the question is also, what are you doing why are you sending it back to Zoom? And the reason I ask that is that sending stuff back to Zoom is a pretty, it's a dicey thing to do unless that's going to be the show. So I guess the question is, are you trying to have people interact from a live Zoom room and then push that back into into the Zoom, because people can hear them there too. So I guess the question is, are you doing something where you're putting them into are you putting them into a breakout room and then moving them into the main room? And so that's the part that I don't understand there. As far as recording, if you're not being able to see it, make sure that you have, Guy posted this as well, make sure that you have recording privileges, host or co-host. So if you can't see or hear their videos, make sure that you are the owner of it, or you are and the host or the co-host, or you ask for the recording privileges. The easiest thing to do is just make whoever's going to be the vMix or Zoom ISO or whatever, just make them, either have them own the meeting or make them co-host as soon as they come in. That's a really easy way to make that work. So try those things and let us know if that works. Next question.
David Brady in New York comes up next. Dave, not me, and he's talking about Dave's Garage, the YouTube thing, buys a PDP 11/34 and adds Wi-Fi to it. Thoughts? And he also says, can we get him on the show one day?
Go ahead, Nigel.
He gave me a chance to revel in the past, briefly watching that YouTube video and the role of the PDP and how the mini computer was going to take over the world. And that's a longer conversation maybe about why that didn't happen. But it would be fun to get him. He's an interesting guy. He does some great videos. And I learned to program on a PDP-8, its predecessor. And I had a customer once, and at the start of the relationship with my customer, he told me PDPs were going to take over the world. And at the end of the relationship with the customer, I said, are you still buying PDPs? Yes. He said, by the pound, and I don't mean sterling. And that, in the space of 2 or 3 years, is what happened to that product set.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Dave's Garage is an interesting YouTube channel. He's one of the former architects of Windows. He wrote a lot of the underlying code for DOS and the Task Manager. I think his code is still in there. He's now retired and has a great garage full of interesting toys. And his most recent episode was on that PDP-11, where he made it not only have a serial port, and Wi-Fi to it because he wanted to have it remotely located in his area of antique computers, but still communicate with it over an RS-232 port, which you then had to convert to Wi-Fi to talk to the PDP-11. And then he also made it battery powered, which was quite interesting. It took 4 giant lithium ferrite block batteries and a big sine wave inverter. But he got it running it could run in the field now. It's portable and battery powered.
And it's got a really good setup too. So hold on. There's him talking here. I like his setup. So it's
he does
good.
a whole tour of all of his garage. There's a recent video he did that's a tour of his garage, and it's interesting to take a look at that. So he's got a lot of great toys.
Yeah. So it's cool. Next question.
Scott Hancock in Tokyo comes up next. With VisionPro needing to be configured for each user, doesn't this take it out of the kiosk public display market? Perhaps the necessary tether would also be prohibitive.
Go, Bill.
Well, it certainly does in this generation, because I think you can have a guest user and the primary user, and they have to be kind of set up and configured for that. But I always remember this is a 1.0 product. Apple, released this onto the world. They kept it in the United States up until just a week or so ago, and now it's a global phenomenon of people having access to this new kind of virtualization technology. It'll be interesting to see if, like a lot of Apple 1.0s, I'm thinking of the iPod and things like that, they eventually do their research on a standalone product, but the next thing you know, those things are folded into other devices or other things. So it's going to be interesting to look back after another decade goes by and see how much of this research goes into things that are easier to access in the catalog of devices. So I wouldn't count it out just because right now it's hard to pass it around at a party.
Yeah, go ahead, Corey.
My 2 cents.
Yeah, augmented display devices were never meant to be kiosks or public devices. They're very personal. They're designed for one person. And Apple made it a little tougher, but at least, like the HoloLens, you can adjust the diopters on that, and you don't have that you have to order diopters to match your eyesight for the VisionPro. So that makes it kind of difficult to share it with anybody who has any vision that is different from your own. So unless you can put your glasses on underneath, I don't know, Alex, maybe you can tell us if it's possible to wear your glasses and the VisionPro at the same time. In any degree of comfort, it might be quite uncomfortable. But it's not really designed for public consumption. It's pretty much a private device.
Yeah, I haven't tried to wear it with my glasses. I mean, I put contacts in immediately, and mostly because I like my glasses. And so I destroyed a couple sets of glasses doing that with my my MetaQuest or the Oculus before that. I think that it is. We did some experiments in this area specifically with the Samsung Gears, and the reason that we used those specifically is because they had a diopter on the top that you could scroll in, and that was the reason that we didn't use anything else. It was really funny. It was like that was the decider, was that I can take anybody, they can take their glasses off and put it on. And what we were doing there was providing 360 tours of expensive houses. So if you're imagine going into a I don't know, H&R, not H&R Block, but a place that's selling a bunch of houses, and you want to be able to go to those houses virtually before you actually visit them because it's some other part of the country. And we were giving people the opportunity to walk through them as a test. So we did a handful of houses. And the problem was really changing them out and how many people can you do that with. So it really meant that the kind of houses that you're looking at really needed to be over, I think it was 1.5 million to make it worth doing. And now there's less demand for that because of the new rules for real estate agents. So there's just less money that's available to do things around sales than there was before. So, because there's a lot of money floating around if you had a big house, like, hey, it's worth spending a couple grand on something that is going to, sell that house a little bit faster. So, the goal there is to, the more people that know about what the house looks like, the more demand there is for the house. The house goes up, and the house doesn't have to go very much to make it worth doing that. So anyway, so I think that was a good one. Cleaning them, moving them around. Ultraviolet was what we used for those things. You'd wipe them down and then put them under an ultraviolet light, and you'd have to have them pretty deep to be able to do that. And it worked okay. The hardest part with the Vision does a little bit better at this. The hardest part with most of these devices is you can kind of see what people are doing, but telling them how to get from one place to the other becomes difficult. So again, I think it is hard. I don't really see them very much as a kiosk kind of thing. I really think that they're more of a personal thing, as we've stated before. But I do think that one of the things that's really missing a lot of times for these is open space. A lot of people don't have a big open space in their house. And so being able to provide, I know it sounds crazy, but being able to provide open spaces, I think there's going to be something people are interested in. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and I might point out anything that is stereo vision thing that you strap on your face, or even if you go to the theater to watch something in 3D, if you're like me or like Bill and have your eyes or your lenses adjusted for monovision, where you have one eye set to focus closer and the other eye set to focus farther away, this is very convenient because you don't have to wear glasses and your brain just switches between the eyes and puts whatever you're looking at in the plane that you're trying to concentrate on and focus. But the problem is when you go see a stereo movie, the screen is a fixed distance away. And you put on the glasses, the 3D glasses, and now your eyes are both trying to focus at the same distance and get different images, and one will be out of focus, and it kind of destroys the stereo depth. So that's why I never go to 3D movies anymore, because you would have to correct your vision back to equal for both at the same distance in order for that to work with your brain and see a stereo image.
Sorry, Photoshop took over my thing. Kyle?
Just back to the question, wouldn't like some sort of anti-theft cabling also be needed? So the tether thing you would need to have a tether somewhere anyway. So I don't think that's necessarily the thing. But I agree with Bill that it's interesting. Like as a 0.1, maybe not like this current model, but I definitely see where it could be useful in the future. That's my...
Yeah, and again, I think that the real value of this is really, again, a lot of these things as they come out will not be in the market that they just won't be in certain markets. I'm not sure that this is going to be a market that is there. I do think that there's a lot of things that we would use kiosks for or use tours for. I mean, I think that one thing that we got into with the Samsung Gear, this is, I don't know, many, many years ago now, and others, was we built virtual museums, and we were able to track your headset. Now, in our case, before we had inside out tracking, so we had outside in tracking. Outside in means we have cameras around the perimeter. And in this case, we had a pretty nice motion capture system and put reflectors on. And then we were able to drive what you were looking at in real time and you're able to walk through a museum. So think of like the King Tut, display or whatever. In our case, it was Shona sculpture because that's what I had. I have lots of Shona sculptures. So we digitized some of those and you could walk around between them. And then if you go to inside out, which is what we have now, you don't need to have all that expensive equipment and you can just walk around in it. And so I think that the headset's capable of it. What we haven't seen is people building enough fidelity yet to make that actually worth. A lot of the 3D is just, okay. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Ben in Singapore. Does a single Thunderbolt 4 port on a laptop have enough bandwidth to run 2 units of Sonnet SE1 Blackmagic DeckLink Duo 2 combos on a loop? Need a total of 6 SDI for a mobile vMix rig.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm not sure this is the port the port probably isn't the limiting factor here. I mean, because I have both a MacBook Pro and a MacBook Air that I use for 2 different things. They have the same port, but their performance is entirely different. And so it's not necessarily the port, it's the amount of processing power, the speed of the I/O and the rest of those things that determines how much you can do off the port. I have had circumstances where my Air is underpowered for running a particular thing I have to do, but the MacBook Pro with exactly the same port, quote unquote, handles it just fine. So I think you have to look beyond just whether the port is there and understand what's behind the port in terms of processing.
Yeah, Guy Cochran in the chat says, haven't had good luck looping out of the SE1. Recommend using the BMD Quad 2 card with 8 ports. Lots of people here use that setup, and then you can find them from the same reseller I did for $360. Yeah, the new ones are pretty expensive for the quads, but I would definitely recommend using one quad over trying to do anything like this. So you would then have 8 SDI inputs or I'm sorry, outputs to do that. Well, then either one. you can pick how you want to go in and out from that process. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Hot Springs, Arkansas. Mixer vis-a-vis interface. Is the Lewitt CONNECT 6 desktop 6x6 dual USB-C audio interface a good mixer also?
It has mixing capabilities to it. I don't think Courtney can let me know. It doesn't feel like the kind of thing I would use as a mixer. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yep, you're right, Alex. I wouldn't use it as a mixer. If you look at it, it's got one knob on it, and it's tough. You have to use an app running on your computer or a tablet or something else in order to control the other inputs and see the levels of the other inputs, I think. And it has one big knob right there on the front of it, so it's hard if you want to grab and control the levels of multiple inputs and easily access them without having to have another app open on your computer or on a separate laptop. So I would go with for the $300, you can probably get a decent analog with a analog mixer with a digital output with a USB output that will output a nice mix of your inputs. Or you can even, for double the price, you can get a fairly decent digital mixer. So, where you have actual sliders to control each input channel.
Next question.
Gabriana Asesio Mistera in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan says, what were the headsets that they were wearing on CNN at the convention? They were earphones and a mic, very thin and looked very cool. That's a QR code question.
And I was trying to find, oh, wait, here we go. Maybe this is it. Hold on. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
They looked like a Countryman or some type of small pickup microphone that came over a headset on CNN. I did notice that.
I think I got it.
Okay, show a picture. Maybe we can figure it out. I did notice that CBS, when they did their nightly news from the convention floor, were also using headsets, and they were using these Sennheisers because I went and looked them up. They were using these HMD 27s, which are dynamic microphones, and they sounded pretty good. But all the anchors were wearing these over the ear because there was a lot of noise going on that convention floor. And so only way to isolate you from the noise in that convention during a live show.
I think that they're DPAs. And DPA makes a version of this where it is where they have a headset integrated with a small headset. There's a couple different ones that do it, but I think that might be a DPA. The only reason I'm not sure is because it's coming out in a way that I haven't seen a DPA work. So I think that my guess is if you look at the DPA's line, you may see one that looks very similar if it's not that one specifically. But I think it might be a DPA, and I can't remember the name of it, but they do make one that looks exactly like that. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. I've enjoyed rediscovering my Synthstrom Deluge integrated synth drum machine sequencer with the latest 1.1 community firmware. Ever rediscovered old gear and got the same satisfaction as when you get new gear?
Rarely. I'm very much of an old gear guy. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I have a old gear behind me, but it's great for decoration. But I usually, the only piece of old gear, and it's not really that old, is that I still to this day, often use my my Sound Devices Pix 240s. I've got like 2 or 3 of them that have survived many years of use, and it's still just one of the best little video recorders with all the audio I/O that you can you can do a lot of different things with it and view it. And I'm surprised at how often I still put it into the chain. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I have a Kurzweil K2000 that I bought back in the 90s. And occasionally I go back to it. And recently I went back to it and I went, this is very much set in the 90s, this hardware, although it's an amazing synth. And a lot of performers still use a K2500 or a K2000, the same issue of this particular synth to play on stage. And so I went, maybe I'll update it because its main interface is a floppy drive to load samples in. And I had already added the sample feature, the SMP board, and the extra PRAM and the extra RAM into it. But I went in and put a floppy emulator in, replaced the floppy drive with a plug-in SD card, and I also replaced the SCSI interface with an SD card interface. I could put up to a terabyte. The original, it had an original SCSI hard drive interface that would hold 25 megabytes or something, but very small SCSI drive. But they make boards, aftermarket boards now are made to substitute and go inside that synth and make it a lot easier to use with solid state memory, and instead of spinning drives or SCSI drives that are a disaster. So now I brought it up to date. And so it was fun to play with again without having to load 12 floppies to load a bunch of samples.
Next question.
Next one comes from Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Talk about how you do a parallax shot with a drone as shown in this clip, and he has a link there to the Bruno K. This camera equals the future of filmmaking little video.
Courtney?
Well, basically, I think what he's talking about as a parallax shot is just kind of you pick a subject, and all the drone software that I've come across at DJI's Fly software does this, lets you pick an object on the control software and highlight it, and it will then track that object and keep that object center frame and focused. And then there are certain preset patterns that you can fly. You can do an orbit, and there's one I think, I can't remember when it's up and away. It's like a corkscrew that keeps, if you tap on your face, let's say, standing on the top of a mountain, and you do orbit, it will fly around you 360 degrees with you in the foreground. There's another one you can set that will zoom out and fly in a circle and go up in a corkscrew type arrangement. So there are these canned pre-planned flight paths that you can program in, and it will track whatever object you set as the center. And as it does that orbit, the foreground is going one direction, the background is going the other direction, and the object of focus is in the center. So that creates that multiple parallax shift in the background. So you can just use the pre-programmed flight paths that are in the software for most of the drones.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, and there's another use for them. I think Hitchcock and some other people have used this to great effect, where you're flying or rolling on a camera car or whatever towards an object in the distance, and you change your zoom level such that the object you're flying towards stays in exactly the same position, but by virtually changing your focal length as you proceed it in exactly the right way so that, again, the object stays straight, or stays in position and stays fixed, the entire background kind of zooms towards you. It's a disorienting effect, and for people who are doing things like horror movies and things like that, it can be very disquieting to see this because it's not normal. You don't, usually if you're coming towards something, your brain is figuring this all out, and it messes with your brain a little bit. So I think that may be what they're talking about. There have been traditional, I think North by Northwest used one of them. I was trying to think of old places that I've seen this weird compression of depth of field effect in a single shot, and that may be what they're talking about there. Next question. Next one comes from Awanakahi Black Bear Marshall in the Oahe Nation. 2110 was sold to industry as uncompressed SDI HDoIP with Blackmagic Design now using their own compressed flavor of 2110. Is this another misstep in making their products less compatible to industry standards used by other gear like they did in the past with 3G and so forth?
I think we answered this already, but we'll answer it one more time, and then probably not again. So for a while. So anyway, there wasn't a misstep by Blackmagic. The industry was behind. Blackmagic built their own format so that they could get 4K out, 3G out. At the time, a lot of us used SDI-B, which was their version of that, until SDI-A caught up, and then we had the option to go back and forth, and you had to know it was there, but it allowed them to move forward when the industry wasn't. I don't think that in general Blackmagic will continue to be able to support other things, but I think that number one is 2110 internally it wasn't sold as an uncompressed SDI HD over IP. It was compressed as IP video, and there was in the spec. They have not done anything outside of the 2110 spec. I've talked to people that are on the 2110 spec team, and they are not, Blackmagic's not stepping out of it, just using what's available there. And it's taking a long time. 2110 has lost an enormous amount of ground to NDI because it's uncompressed. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for for Blackmagic to move forward. And I think that the danger for folks with everybody else with 2110 is that if Blackmagic is big enough that it could create the standard, and they've made it an open standard, so it's not like something that they're owning, so other people can use it to be part of that process. So it'll be seen. I think that Blackmagic doesn't worry that much about external compatibility. They put enough in there that other people can use it, but they're building their whole own ecosystem. And by the size of the booth at NAB, it's not super problematic for them. So I don't know if they need the rest of the industry much longer. For the size that they're getting to. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, this is a 2110, or or some flavors of 21 of HD over IP have been around for a while. In fact, there was a protocol called HD base T, not to be confused with 2110, which was a method of sending HDMI over long distances over Cat6, which there was one company that made the chipsets that did this, that digitized it. You can still get these adapters like this monoprice Blackbird. It was an HD base T extender. And this, it does not use standard packetized communication over that Ethernet cable. So it's not, I don't think it's routable with a regular switcher, but it is proprietary, and you have to have a sender and a receiver to decode HD base T, but you can extend a high definition over long distances with something like that, which is not to be confused with 2110 and Blackmagic's implementation.
Yeah, and building a vertically integrated solution like what Apple has, Blackmagic has kind of been moving in that direction all the way through from acquisition through delivery. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. It's almost impossible to do. But once you get to a certain level of it working, it becomes almost impossible to compete with. That's the problem that a lot of people have, is that because you don't have to pay attention to pretty much anybody else. And so Blackmagic's not quite there yet, but they're quickly approaching that level of integration. And so I think that's and that they've been slowly piecing that together for a long time. So I don't know if it matters to them that much, but they did make it an open standard so other people can tie back into what they're doing. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Hot Springs, Arkansas. Would you use the emeet webcam and microphone combo called streamcam in any production situation? He's got a link there to it.
Yeah, I clicked on the link. It looks like a neat little tech thing, but for a production situation, probably not. But I do some theatrical and or like art installation, creative use of video and angles that I might try and use it for, but typical production situation, no.
Nope. It's just I have to admit that there's just plenty of webcams in the same ballpark as far as cost goes that I would use before this. It just doesn't. I don't know who they're selling it to. And some people who don't know what's available. Next question.
Harold Williams is up next from Portsmouth, Virginia. Whenever I set up a firewall on a new router, I always open port 1935 for live streaming using RTMP. I noticed Restream wanted me to use port 1937. Would that stop my stream from connecting if I were at a venue using their Wi-Fi?
It just depends. It depends on the venue. Number one is I don't know. Trying to think if I've ever streamed using Wi-Fi. I'm not clear I've ever done that. That's my first level of confusion is, other than like streaming something for friends, I've never done a professional stream with Wi-Fi. It's not, don't view it as a viable solution. Like I just wouldn't take the job. Like so the because it's too high risk to do that. So I guess so that's, for me, that's problematic. I mean, I spend a lot of time working with venues to get access to the WAN through some kind of wired connection, and I push pretty hard so to do that. So anyway, so I think that so I don't know. I've never seen something asked for 1937, but I also don't use Restream very much either. So anyway, so I think that it depends on how tightly they've pulled that together. And as was pointed out here, I think it's incoming that it's looking for, not outgoing. So I'm not sure if that. Ronnie Hofstoy said, open a port is incoming. Firewall is normally going out of it. So you should be okay, but not certain. Next question.
Daniel Goldstein in Baltimore, Maryland says conventional wisdom is never contribute a stream from encoder to ingest point over Wi-Fi. We were just talking about that, but that's based on H.264 over RTMP. Does anybody have any practical experience substituting H.265 over SRT with a large enough buffer to make plebeian Wi-Fi useful?
You could also use something like Zixi. I mean, if I was going to start doing Wi-Fi, I'd probably be thinking about Zixi over SRT, because you're going to need all the help you can get to make that work. Wi-Fi, you're asking Wi-Fi to do something that it is not built for, and so I don't recommend it. I do have streams that I've done with cellular, and so cellular and Wi-Fi work very differently, and so I would rather find a cellular solution than a Wi-Fi solution. Next question.
Noah in Vancouver's up with this one. What are the recommended max specs for Apple Vision Pro development?
I don't know what the official specs are. I would, because of a lot of the I/O that you may want to use for bits and pieces and the speed of what you're doing, I would recommend a Mac Studio, as the minimum. But you could probably do it on a Mac Mini Pro. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, this is kind of a development tool at this point in its history, so I would think that somebody wanting to do efficient development would look at the top end of the M series chips and get something, whether it was a Studio, be perfect, whether it was one of the high-end laptops, something that has that M4, probably a Max that really is going to push data through there, because if you're in development, time is money, and you want something that'll really kind of, you shouldn't underpower a machine. And most of the people are going to be spending that kind of money for a Vision Pro, probably are not limited by budget. So I would stay up near, not necessarily totally at, but near the top of the spec range on whatever machine you go and get something very modern that has all the latest horsepower and GPU and the rest of that.
Yeah, I definitely would buy something with an M2 or M3 chip to make sure that you have enough. But as far as that goes, I mean, I think that's and then remember that you need a tether. So you want to get the development. There's a development tether from the computer to the headset, and you'll need that if you're doing development. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I probably just missed this, but is extra hours announced ahead of time, or is that announced soon before it's happening, just because it's more fluid time than the Daily Show? Love that we do it.
It's just getting off the ground. So I've been a little hesitant to put it into the email. It should be every Monday at 6, and I think we were maybe a couple minutes late over on the last one, just setting some stuff up. But I think that it is. It will be at 6 o'clock on Mondays, and it'll be. There may be a little bit of hiccups as we get all the rails set up, to make that actually happen. But we're pretty committed to making it every Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and it's a very different show. We're kind of moving through different people to be on the show. It's a set number of people. It's a much longer discussion, and so there's just it's a different feel to it, and we're happy with that. So if you want to check it out, Mondays at 6, and if you just go into Makana or you go up to YouTube, you'll see it there. And we will start announcing it. There's not going to be any specific subject. It's literally us just starting to we just talk, and we talk very slowly. Like it's I don't mean we talk slowly, but we don't here we're changing subjects every 2 or 3 minutes. There, it's more like every 20 or every 10. Like we just chew on stuff, which I think is it's a fun way. We were just experimenting with different formats. So, next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota is up next. Is the original LiveU Solo HDMI video audio encoder still a useful tool? There has been no updates since 2021, but they are still available new.
Yeah, so this is the, I don't know if I can pull that up real quickly, but this is a hardware unit that basically what it's really good for is allowing you, hold on, here's what it looks like. So this is the LiveU Solo, and you could theoretically, use cellular over it. But what it really is good for is just pushing your system into the cloud. So into the LiveU cloud. So if you want to contribute to the LiveU cloud quickly and easily, and that means you could route it out to any other location, you could do that. Now, I guess the Solo Pro just got up to 6 cell modems, so you could theoretically do that. I will say that I don't know if Ronnie can let us know on the thing, because I haven't used that, because we use an 800, both 090 as well as office hours. We have an 800 that we use for that LiveU lets us use for shows. So I've kind of, that backpack is the form factor I've been used to for the last 15 years of some 400, 600, 800. But I would say that this one still is useful if you're trying to specifically contribute to the LiveU cloud and you're using either their cloud infrastructure or you want to spit it out somewhere else. But that's, Edward Augustine says that he still uses his LiveU Solo Plus, but he does it directly to YouTube. So there's a couple different options there. Next question.
Next one comes to us from CJ Covell in Cincinnati, Ohio. FX3 is powering off after 30 minutes, both when plugged in with a dummy battery and when plugged in with USB power. Power save mode is turned off. Camera is indoors in 68 degrees environment. Any ideas that I'm missing here?
I'll go with Courtney.
Have you updated to version 3.0? That I did find some scuttlebutt on Reddit here about the FX3 randomly shutting off after the update to 3.0 update. So maybe there's an update. Check your firmware after 3.0. Maybe that's a bug that has happened with that particular update that broke something inside. There used to be, a lot of the times these Sony, not only Sony, but Canon still cameras used to have this problem as well. There was a heat issue where running them in video mode, the sensor would overheat after a period of time. But then there was a tariff issue, which the tariff on those cameras as they were imported in the United States were taxed differently based on whether they were a video camera or a still camera. So in order to not be classified as a video camera, they made them shut off if you were in video mode after 30 minutes. So it couldn't be considered a live video camera and be taxed as well. Now, I don't know if this particular camera came under those tariff issues or if they found a way around it. But that could be as well. So check your firmware update. And like I said, there was apparently a problem with version 3 of the firmware. So maybe you want to update it.
Next question.
I think I mispronounced your name. Sorry, CJ. Gus Libby if I'm hoping to get that right, in Satellite Beach, Florida. Anyone find an office hours relevant Prime Day item of exceptional note?
Good, Kyle.
That would be a no, but I did have 2 things in my cart yesterday that I was decided to wait 24 hours just to see if magically they were cheaper today. And alas, they are not. So I'm going to have to go ahead and order them for the normal price.
Good, Nigel.
Very similar. Memory cards, 35% off. So if you're in the market for some new memory cards, that's a pretty good deal. There are some random deals on TVs. We may need a new TV at home, and there's 15 to 25% off new TVs, which is a lot of money when you're spending $2,000 on a TV. If you want a $2,000 TV, that is. So there are deals. I went through my wish list to hope that they used my wish list as the shopping list to buy from, and they chose not to.
Next question.
Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada says, in a worst case scenario, let's say there's a natural disaster that disables YouTube and Google, what's the backup just in case now what situation?
Yeah, a lot of times what we've done, I mean, number one is you have to have a client that's going to be paying for that backup. Like they're paying for, like, we really need to make sure that it's working. So it has to have a budget that's big enough because, for most budgets, it would be, well, like, YouTube isn't working because there's a lot of other benefits to YouTube. Like, for instance, you may have a big following on YouTube that you're trying to stream to. And if you just go to some backup, it's not going to make any difference. Now you're doing all that production for nothing because no one's watching, and so you have to be careful if you're embedding it. So one of the ways that you solve this problem is you embed YouTube or something else into your web page. And so now you can simply change the web page to point to somewhere else. But if you're sending people to YouTube, you're stuck. You're not going to be able to easily move that audience somewhere else. Now, there are a lot of folks that will stream to many different services all at one time. So it might be YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and everything else. And so then in some cases you can message people, like if you can't see it here, go here, but you have to know whether you can actually contact your users or not. There's lots of other backups to things. So there are industrial level processes like Akamai and others that can that I don't know if they've ever gone down. Like, they might have gone down at some point, but it's usually the web page or something else. And especially at that size, if you're really in a cannot fail kind of environment, you're paying Akamai a lot of money. And then they're giving you people at the NOC that are sitting there watching your stream. They've managed a backup to the backup to the backup to the backup to make sure that your stream is going to go out. But that can cost millions of dollars to make that happen. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, Chester, you mentioned a worst case scenario and a natural disaster. I'm not sure that you're thinking about either of those two services as your key. I need this communication to the outside world. I think EMS and news and local information about things are going to be your priority. If you're getting those through either YouTube or Google as your source, I'm not sure either of those. Maybe some news function in Google to search out, where does the information come from? But in that respect, I would have a small list of emergency contact things that don't rely on the internet, maybe some that do just in case you still have connectivity. But in serious natural disaster cases, you really can't count on, I don't think, your web access is the number one way to get things. Well,
I think that, and we have had issues where something happens in YouTube where the northern seaboard went down. Like there was some, we've had that happen. We had one with, it wasn't YouTube, it was another service, another public streaming service that someone cut one cable of fiber, probably a bunch of strands, doing construction, and it took down half the United States, of their ability to stream to half the United States. So it's not that it doesn't happen, but it has become very rare, because after those kinds of things happen, then, there's a whole bunch of meetings that say, let's never have that happen again. And so but generally, if you are, your defense generally is that it is, number one is to send it out to a bunch of different social platforms all at one time. So if you're having an event that big, send it out to a bunch of different things. Potentially have a private one that's like Akamai or others like that, that you're sending out to. The chances of all of them going down are pretty low. Next question.
Next one comes to us from David Brady in New York City. What does the panel think was the reasoning behind Japan's outlawing of the floppy disk in 2024? And he's got a link there to the BBC.
Outlawed. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I think outlaw might be slightly too strong. I think what they've said is they're no longer going to accept tax information, which until this year has been required to be submitted on a floppy disk. I had a quick search. I think they last manufactured those in 2011. Sonnet, I think, was the last people making them. So my guess is the supply is one of the challenges, because
they required you to give it to you in floppy drive.
Yeah, I think it was until this year the taxes had to be sent on a floppy side. Japan is it's a very interesting culture if you spent any time there. They are at the same time incredibly advanced in everything they do and very traditional in other ways. And that's part of the beauty of the culture and the life there.
Once you get out of Tokyo, it goes very rural very quickly. I mean, it's like there's a handful of cities that are very, very modern, and then you go out of that. And it was funny. We had a client that had us go to Japan once or twice a year, and I wouldn't be paid by the Japanese division. They had to pay me from the U.S. division because it took so long. Like it took 120 days, minimum to get paid from Japan. And I was like, why does it take so long? And they're like, oh, they're doing it all paperwork. I'm like, paperwork? And they're like, yeah, they still do the accounting in paper. And I was just like, and this is not today, but it was like 10 years ago. I mean, it was something that should have gone away a lot earlier, but it's like, that's the way you do that. And, and it was, but I was just like, oh, I can't do a business that way. But I love Japan, by the way. And I love the fact that you can go to a small town off of one of the railways an hour. You can ride for an hour and go off, and it's very traditional. And it's pretty awesome that you can go from something so modern in Tokyo to something so not modern somewhere else. And it's interesting. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, they didn't outlaw the floppy disk. You can still buy the outboard drives that connect over USB to any computer these days. Still, I have one sitting right over there. So it still can be used. The problem is, when you think about it, back when this law was set in place, was for submitting documents to the government is what's been outlawed. Or they no longer accept floppy disks for submitting documents to the government. When you think about it, what other way would you have of submitting a 300-page document or a 500-page document other than printing it out and shipping it to the government, which would require them, if they need to get it into their computer, to scan it back in. So the floppy drive was a disposable form of transmitting before secure connections to the internet, to do those long documents with. And it made perfect sense back then in the 90s, where you could just mail in a single 3.5-inch floppy and have a 700-page tax document or whatever document you're submitting to the government. And it only cost you about 50 cents in disposable storage. You could send a thumb drive these days, but back then it would have cost you about $150 to send a thumb drive. So it made perfect sense as far as a means of disposable means of submission of large documents, but it has outlived the fact that now everybody has an internet connection and can just log into a server and transmit a file.
Next question.
Lyle Kwiatkowski in Omaha, Nebraska is up next. Our television studio is looking into replacing our wired lav microphones in our studio. Do you have any recommendations for the best mics for talking head studio shows?
I read that differently. It's way better the way you wrote it, the way you read it. So anyway, I think that it is. There's a wide variety. So I think that part of what I would ask is what your, what budget you have for those lavs. So Mickey suggests the DPA 4060 and the Sennheiser MKE2. He said those are the industry standards for TV. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, those are great units. And if you're moving from wired to wireless, just remember, do search and see what frequencies are in the clear and things like that. I'm still a little leery of replacing wires, which I know work consistently and never fail if they are maintained properly, with wireless, which most of the time,
I don't know if he's saying that I don't know if he's saying he's going to wireless. I think he's just saying that he's just changing them out.
Oh, if you're just changing the capsules, yeah, then you've gotten some great things there. And wired lavs can sound beautiful these days. I was really shocked once upon a time. I got my first chance to use one of the Countryman B3s in a public speaking circumstance, and I was astonished at how great that sounded in that room. So headset mics and wired lavs can be very good these days.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
You can use the Sanken COS 11s are good if you have to hide them. The other thing is they're so tiny, and they're just slightly larger than the cable themselves. You can put two of them on a single tie clip so that you have a backup. If one fails, if a capsule fails, and occasionally a little piece of spittle will fly into a capsule and make it sound crunchy, you have a second one there to go to. And this is done in a lot of live shows these days, because they'll have, especially if they're going into a wireless transmitter, they'll have a pair of transmitters and a pair of microphones on a single tie clip. So they have a backup to go to in case one of them gets funky during the live show.
Yeah, and I will say that I rarely use wireless if I don't have to. I use wireless if people are walking around. As soon as there's plenty of stations that that will give people wireless. It's a convenience factor for the hosts. They can just simply put the packs on. Now they can walk around and between things and everything else. But when given the option, I will almost always use wired. So next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas wonders, could extra hours be used as a development squad for new panelists and crew before transitioning them to office hours?
We are going to use it as a development crew, and really the place we are always looking for people who want to work in office hours, and you can apply for that directly. So, and the two systems do not work the same. So, extra hours is not a preparation for office hours because they're entirely different systems. So I think that one of the things that we are interested in doing is having more people understand how to use the system there. So if you're interested in doing that, you can do that. We are looking at providing a handful of people the ability, if they have their own AWS infrastructure, and we are encouraging people to use Vector for that, is to jump in and be able to use extra hours as a test place to do a show. We're not going to make that. It's not like open-ended, like everybody can do it, but we may allow as many as 2 or 3 people to jump in. I know Oliver Breidenbach is going to look at doing it for Mimo Live, where he just grabs onto that show and plays with it. We have a couple other people that are interested, and we are definitely interested in making sure that we have a lot of people training to do the vector side of things for that one, because that's what that primary is the primary test for. So we are going to use it as a way to train people, but it's not a training for office hours. And the best way to train for office hours is to join the office hours team, and go through that process. So, but I think that I would recommend that to be doing on the main show, and eventually the two of these will meet. Where we have the same style of infrastructure that we have with the morning show happening in the cloud. So that's that's kind of the goal here. So, but right now it's just baby steps of turning it on. We're always trying to keep it as a minimum viable product and just add things very slowly to make that work. Go ahead, Courtney.
And if you're just interested in becoming a panelist and not necessarily knowing how the sausage is made on the back end and how to run or be a volunteer running the technical director or panel liaison or any of the other positions that are available behind the scenes. If you just want to tune up your camera and audio setup to make sure you're qualified to be on a panel, just go into after hours and you'll find a bunch of people hanging out there, and you'll just turn on your camera and microphone and say some words, and a lot of people will pop in there and give you a ruthless review on what your signal looks like, what kind of improvements you could make, and what it would take to become a good video and audio to become a panelist. And then, of course, we have a panelist meeting, don't we still, Alex? It happens weekly. So new panelist meeting, attend that, and we'll also get you set up.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama City says, I'm planning on adding more sources for flexibility in my fly kit. With a video hub 20 by 20, can I have one source routed to multiple locations? Never used a video hub and looking forward to buying one.
Yeah, that's exactly how the video hub works. And always buy twice as many in and outs that you think you need, at least. You will fill up any hub that as soon as your mind knows what it can do with a hub. So you can have any number of the inputs go to any number of the outputs. And so assuming you have them. And so what usually happens is you run out of outputs because you have 5 or 6 things going into them. A lot of times, for instance, kind of the base set of the base set of what you do is a lot of times I'll take all the inputs that I'm going to use in my switcher, and then I feed them into the router, and then I go out of the router into the switcher. Now I have access to all of those ISOs that I can send out to outputs. Then I usually take the outputs from my switcher and put them all back into the router. So then I have all those outputs as well. And then you may have your converters and all kinds of other things that may go into it. And that's how routers start to really stack up and become very complicated. So you end up with a lot. I do use smaller routers for little very small kits, like a 20 by 20. I would still consider a smaller router. Most of the time, if you can, a 20 by 20 is great, and if that's what you can afford, then get that. But I generally will start at a 40 by 40. Because you will fill it up. Like you will just and And so and I know it sounds crazy to have that many, but you think, oh, why would you use a 40 by 40? If you have a 40 by 40 for a year, you'll know exactly why you use a 40 by 40. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, one thing, just to correct just a little bit, it's not any number of inputs to any outputs. It's any input to multiple outputs. You can't do multiple inputs to a single output, but you can route and be a DA as well. So I just want to clarify.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you can have 5 inputs, and then one can go out to 10 outputs, and one can go out to 3 outputs, and one can go. Yeah, you can't do both at the same time. But what you can do is keep on rerouting those to those different outputs. And then what's interesting about the video hubs is that once you have the controller, like for instance, you can build macros into those controllers. So like I have a lot of routing going on in the office, but I only have to hit a couple buttons to change things to a lot of different places. So when I push that button, it's rerouting to a whole bunch of places at one time, and that's a little piece of hardware. Of course, you can also use their software to do it. You can even take Excel files and bring them in, that are all the routing. So there's a lot of different ways of managing it. And of course, it has its own API, so that a lot of things can automatically do those things as well. Next question.
Håkan Force in Stockholm, Sweden's up next. Any favorite companion plugins you use except controlling your devices?
Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what except controlling your devices means in this context, because I use Companion to control my devices. In fact, my whole studio fundamentally runs on Companion, my lights, my ATEM, all of that stuff. The most interesting thing, I have 2 things that I really like. I like Vicar Listener to send stuff between my machines, and I'm just starting to learn to use the X32. So I wasn't quite sure what the except was, except controlling devices, because it's all to me about controlling devices.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Alex, you mentioned sending the event to multiple platforms at once. Would use of an aggregator like Restream be best for that, or does it just create another single point of failure?
Restream is a popular one to send to a lot of different services all at one time. It depends on what you're trying to do. I think that a lot of times I haven't had as much success as other people with Restream. So it's been, with a variety of issues, and I don't like the amount of data I get from it. I feel like I'm shooting blindly into the dark, and so someone who's used to having a little more control, I think it rubs up against what you want. But as a consumer device that streams out to a lot of different platforms, I think it does a pretty good job of doing that. And in some cases, it gets to services that you couldn't normally get to. So I've used it specifically to get to specific services in specific countries that I don't have any other access to. But outside of that, I think that you can also build these solutions. As Edward Augustine points out, you can build the solutions in AWS to stream to as many outputs as you want. It will cost you money. It depends on how often you do it. If you don't do it very often, AWS is cheaper but more work. If you do it often, Restream is probably less expensive. So it just depends on what you're looking for there. If they put more telemetry into it, I'd probably be more interested. Next question.
Håkan Force in Stockholm, Sweden again. And this time, how do you communicate the rundown during live sports broadcasts with your talent, comms, and?
Courtney?
Well, there's software available that from Cvent. There's a thing called ShowFlow, which is designed specifically for doing this. It keeps a live rundown that is available on apps that are out there. You can put on your phone or on a PC that has automatic show tracking, real-time collaboration. So you've got chat back and forth. Plus, it shows you the rundown as it changes. And we know that that rundown can change frequently during a live show. When somebody doesn't show up or something fails, you need to adjust quickly. And so something like that. Now, I don't endorse it because I haven't used it. So look into ShowFlow. You can try it for free. So there's a piece of software to help you do that. And of course, comms are always great for those very last minute second changes that you can't type into ShowFlow.
I go, Bill.
Yeah, it's a combination usually of having a run of show ahead of time so that you're prepared, but then comms and a tech director or somebody in your ear telling you about those last minute changes. That's what the combination is that usually keeps shows on the rails in a live situation.
And I have we're only going to do 1 hour today. I have a technical issue here that I'm not going to be able to get over. I did something during the show and I've broken something. So I'm not going to. So anyway, so I was like, oh, this is new. And
well,
let's try
just
this.
use generative AI to fix it.
That's the problem. That's the problem. I updated something in Photoshop that I was like, oh, this will be great. And I broke it. Anyway, and I can't quite figure out I can't get it to work. I was feeling a little adventurous, and I was like, this will be great. We'll be able to show something new during the show, and I can't figure out what's going on. So anyway, we will talk about generative AI on Photoshop in a future episode, but it will not be today. So I apologize for my adventureness that I had there. But we will not have a second hour today. I apologize for that. I just won't be able to show it because I've hobbled my system. It's not worth you watching me try to figure
Watch the scheduling. Maybe we can reschedule it because I was looking forward to it.
Yeah, no. We'll definitely reschedule it. It was something I was excited to talk about there, but I'm not going to talk about it today. So thank you so much. Thank you to all the producers who asked all the great questions. Lots of questions coming in. We really appreciate that. And remember that we had a lot of great questions from last night that didn't make it back in today. Remember that you can put questions back in the next day if they're there. So feel free to do that. But thank you so much to the producers for asking those questions. Thank you to the panelists for being here and being part of the show. We can't do this without you. It's really great to have you here. Good conversation. And thank you to the incredible team on the back end that makes sure this work. It is a small village that makes all of this possible, from the management to the planning to the actual production to the development. There's just such a great team that makes this possible. It's kind of crazy that we do what we do. So we really appreciate everybody's contribution. Today, if we had walked around, the Tlaloc Traversal is if we had walked around and done these questions in person, we would have traveled 59,000 miles. That is 95,000 kilometers, and that is 468 million bananas per scale. All right, let's go into after hours.
Generated a whole new form of software called destructive AI.
Yeah, destructive AI. I updated Photoshop. I updated it because I was like, oh, it has new generative. It has new update. The new update for the beta is specifically new generative stuff, and I was like, oh, this will be great. I can show it on the show, and I can't get it to do any it's not broken. I just don't understand what they did. It's a beta, but I don't understand what they did to the interface. And I was like, I don't know where I am. so anyway, I was like, I don't know. I was like, well, I screwed that up.
ChatGPT to explain it to you.
What's the leave the knife in metaphor for that? Of what did you do?
I just didn't think it was going to change so much.
It's like you were going to go drive in a race and they said at the beginning, no more steering wheel, it's fly-by-wire. Have fun on the race.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, exactly. What? And I was just like,